On this episode,
there was more money and diamonds and gas and oil and music. I mean, records.
Why do we want to screw around with records?
I mean, why me? You know, I mean, I'm not really that. But the truth is, I was upsetting the Kremlin more than I was upsetting the mafia, because that blocking Russia getting into the World Trade Organization was a really big victory for the music industry.
from the coveted corner booth in a little bar at the center of the Coachella Valley universe, welcome to another Big Conversation with Patrick Evans and Randy Florence, presented by the McCallum Theater. Visit McCallumTheater.org or reach the box office at 760-340-2787. Gentlemen.
Thanks, Howard. Yes, we are back here in the corner booth at Skip Page's Little Bar in Palm Desert, California, for another edition of Big Conversations Little Bar. My name is Patrick Evans, and I'm here with my co-host, good friend Randy Florence, who is, I think, more excited today than he has been in months to be here at the bar.
Yes.
Way to sell it, Randy. Way to sell it.
I'm really excited to be here. I actually drove 46 miles an hour down 111 to get here.
That is unusual for you. We want to give a shout out to the McCallum Theater, our primary and presenting sponsor of Big Conversations Little Bar. We encourage you to patronize all of the great shows. They have wonderful public outreach with our students throughout the local school systems as well. The McCallum Theater, you can check out McCallumTheater.org, and you can call the box office at 760-340-ARTS and get your tickets.
Ooh.
Yeah, did you know that?
I didn't.
I made it up. I don't know that the number works, but
my phone just rang.
We will. Hey, I'm very excited about our guests today. One is a gentleman who was on previously, but we're talking about an entirely different subject. Fred Bronson joins us, but he is here with David Junk, and they wrote a book called Rockin The Kremlin. And this is a really fascinating look at the post-Soviet Union Russia, the world of music in Russia, where you were, David, helping to import all of these great American acts that had been banned for so many years and couldn't go, and then all of a sudden the Russian society was opened up, and you were in charge of bringing those acts, and you signed Russian acts. I mean, it was a really interesting, fascinating, dangerous time. You said it was like Chicago in the 30s or the Wild, Wild West. So, gentlemen, welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Randy.
And David, somehow you stayed out of prison.
I did, and that was no easy task. There were lots of landmines. I could easily have ended up in a Siberian prison camp for sure, for some of the things I did over there. But thank you, gentlemen, for inviting Fred and I onto the show. It's really fun to be here with you in this little bar.
Isn't this a cool place?
This is so cool. I'm seeing a metallic ticket here for it looks like in Spain, one of their concerts, all over the wallpaper. It's amazing. Just so many rockers, and
the world is represented on these walls.
Yes.
You should feel pretty at home.
I do. I love it.
This is kind of your world.
Yeah. And Metallica, by the way, were extremely popular in Russia and the former Soviet Union. They actually came to perform in the Soviet Union before the breakup. They were invited over right when the ice was starting to thaw, when Gorbachev was opening things up, Glasnost and Perestroika. And so they were one of the first heavy metal bands ever, American heavy metal bands ever to appear in Russia.
Well, let's get into how that started, how you got in that direction and ended up with that kind of position.
Yeah, let's talk about your life before you started doing that.
All right. Well, I grew up in central Ohio on a farm. I'm a farm boy.
Just a simple guy from the Midwest.
Simple guy, right?
Dreaming of Russia.
Quite opposite, actually. I was scared of Russia then, scared of the Soviet Union, because this is, the height of the Cold War, Ronald Reagan's evil empire, speech had happened, and the Americans had boycotted the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow, and the Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan. So you remember mutually assured destruction, right?
Sure.
They had more ICBMs aimed at us than we did at them. So it was scary. And, I assumed our area was going to be a target because we had an Air Force base nearby, a really famous one called Wright-Patterson.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
And yeah, you've heard of it. It's one of the main Air Force bases for the U.S. military. So for sure the Russians were going to knock that out, right?
Now, we were past the days of climbing under our school desks at that point, right?
I know.
As it happened when I was younger. The first time we were worried about them bombing us.
I mean, there was no surviving.
Yeah.
And if you did survive the blast, what about nuclear winter? That was the thing everyone talked about.
Right.
The radioactive cloud. So I feared the Russians. One of my first memories was even when the Soviet basketball team beat our American basketball team in the Munich Olympics in 1970. Remember that?
We got ripped off.
They cheated. The referee was totally paid off.
Right.
So a lot of reasons to fear the Russians, but when the Berlin Wall came down, I went to Berlin to see a rock concert by the former band member of Pink Floyd, Roger Waters.
Sure.
Who's in a lot of trouble these days, by the way. But at that time, in 1990, he staged the Wall concert. If you remember, he said he would never perform that concert again until the Berlin Wall came down, when he left Pink Floyd. Well, when the Berlin Wall came down, he went and staged that big Wall concert there in Potsdamer Platz. And I, being a big Pink Floyd fan my whole life, I had to go. I just had to see it, right? And so I packed my backpack, headed over, got a hostel in Berlin, East Berlin, where I stayed, and I went and saw this tremendous concert with 500,000 Europeans. But that's not the real thrill. The real thrill was meeting all these Eastern Europeans from Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, Russia, Ukraine. They had all come to see this concert. And I was one of the few Americans in the crowd, and then I was getting peppered with questions about democracy and capitalism and marketing, and because they were all just tasting capitalism at their doorstep, and this was right when things were falling, and
these
freedom was breaking out.
Were forbidden for so long.
Exactly, and to have that at a rock concert in East Berlin, it was just, it changed my life. And one of them said to me, you ought to come back here. You could do really well helping us transition from this communism to capitalism, and that was it. That's all it took.
And were you still on the farm at that point?
No, I had gotten a job in the state legislature in Columbus. I was working as an intern there. I was ready to go to law school. I was, going to do that kind of lobbying, maybe. I don't know. Kind of boring.
No passion.
So they said to you, come back and do this and that. That captured your So what was the mechanism that allowed you to do that?
You know what? Russian language. They told me, one of the very cute girls from Czechoslovakia told me that I met, told me, everyone speaks Russian in Hungary and Slovakia and Estonia.
All of the former Soviet
republics,
they forced them to speak, where they tried to stamp out the native languages.
So Russian was like the language of English is to the business or the international culture. Russian was for that part of the world, Eastern Europe especially. So I came back and I studied Russian. I moved from Ohio to San Francisco because they have one of the largest Russian populations in America. And I studied Russian language there, got an MBA, and went back to Russia to work.
And who were you working for?
When I worked in the music industry.
Yeah.
So PolyGram was the first record label to move into Russia. It was the world's largest record company at the time, PolyGram. You might remember them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I have a bunch of PolyGram records.
Okay. So Bon Jovi, Bob Marley, Pavarotti, all the superstars.
Few good ones. Yeah.
Island Records, Def Jam Records, all those big. They were the biggest label in the world, and they also were the label of the Scorpions. And if you remember, the Scorpions had that anthem, "Wind of Change," that everyone was listening to, and it became a symbol of liberation of Eastern Europe. Well, Gorbachev invited the Scorpions to come to the Kremlin, And one of our PolyGram executives accompanied the band to meet Gorbachev. And, Gorbachev was very grateful. It's such a beautiful anthem, peace and breaking out and Gorky Park and all that. And our PolyGram executive decided, hey, Russia, that's the next market. That's where we're going to open a record label. But they needed help. And they put a help wanted ad in the Moscow Times. And I answered it.
That's how this happened.
Bingo.
A lot out in the Times.
So it was the right place. I had no connections in the music industry. Patrick, I don't even play a musical instrument. I don't, it was just being in the right place at the right time.
Wow.
I had an MBA. That helped. That certainly helped. But being in
clearly
Russia.
the linchpin is that you spoke fluent Russian.
For sure.
And were you
And you were
considered
there.
somewhat of an expert simply because you were an American?
Yeah. I didn't know anything about the music
Well,
business.
the job was accounting, right?
I was a specialist in accounting, so I did understand business principles, but I knew nothing about the music business. Nothing about royalties or songwriting or copyrights or any of that. So I had to learn all that super fast.
On-the-job training.
Yeah.
So you, before we dig deep into the book and the stories, how did you and Fred get together to write the book?
Well, that story goes back a ways. I think one of my passions is the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yep.
We
Yes.
talked about that a lot. And in the year 2000, I had been going for 5 years already. It was in Stockholm. And the singer from Russia was a teenage girl who was the first Russian artist signed to Universal Music Russia. Universal ended up buying PolyGram, and David became CEO of Universal. So he was at Eurovision, and we just hit it off. We became friends. Stayed in touch for many, many years, and at some point, we lost touch. But a couple of years ago, Billboard asked me to write a really in-depth story about the history of Ukraine and Russia in Eurovision. I did a lot of interviews, and I thought, I got to get quotes from David. He went to Eurovision as an American representing Russia. He'll have stuff to say. I wrote to the 10-year-old email address, got an immediate reply.
AOL?
It might have been, actually, but I'm on Hotmail, so I'm not one to talk. And then we went to MySpace. No, we didn't go to MySpace. And we did the interview, and David said, so I own the Bang & Olufsen stores in Southern California. Next time you're in LA, let me take you to dinner. I'll show you my store, and we'll talk. So that happened, and over dinner, the Ivy happened to be right across the street from
Nice.
So that's where he took me to dinner. And he said, I want to write a book about my time in Russia. And I said, do you have a publisher? No. Do you want one? Yes. I called my editor. Hey, I got this friend. Here's a book he wants to do. What do you think? He said, I want that book. That's exactly the kind of book we want to do. I tell David the good news, and he said to me, oh, would you write it? And that's how it happened.
Okay. Well, that's a great. Do you still have the Bang & Olufsen? Because I've always wanted a Bang & Olufsen.
I do. Yeah, they're right across from the Ivy. Actually.
We'll talk right after the podcast.
When somebody knows music, they've got that equipment. You know that.
Right.
That's very cool. All right, so you're in Russia, and you answer this help wanted ad, and now all of a sudden you're working for PolyGram Records.
Right.
And the environment in Russia at this time, because these are people that really haven't experienced market capitalism. So it must have just been insane.
So give us a year. When did you start?
1996, I first joined PolyGram. So at that point, there was no music industry per se. It was really controlled, 90% of it was controlled by the Russian mafia. It was counterfeit CDs. It was all these pirate CDs. And the Russian mafia had factories that would produce hundreds of millions of these counterfeit CDs and counterfeit DVDs. Elton John, Bryan Adams, Harry Potter, anything, and sell them throughout Russia and markets, and
they'd buy any of it. They wanted it.
and they were for $2.
Oh, wow.
$2.
Oh, my God.
And our Elton John CD was $20, after tax, because obviously the Russian mafia don't pay taxes. So we had to, with sales tax and everything, you would pay $20 for the same compact disc that would cost you $2 on the pirate market.
So how do you overcome that?
Well, it was a major effort. First, we had to try to raid those factories. So we had our own connections with the Moscow police force, and we would go out on raids and try to confiscate illegal CDs and then take these pirates to court. That was our way of handling it, and it was a terrible failure. It was an absolute disaster.
You're raiding the Russian mafia.
Raiding the Russian pirate factory. Controlled by the Russian mafia.
Oh, okay, so it was easier.
We failed because, and we did this with the Moscow police, right? So we thought, okay, we got our cover, and we can go in and arrest the bad guys and collect the Elton John CDs and take them to court, right? Well, one time I went on a raid, and we write about it in the book, and we get to the gates of this factory, and there's these just tough guys, as usual, hanging around. No big deal. Our Moscow police go up to them, and, and I'm in the van with my bulletproof vest, whatever, record executive there to fight for Elton John, right? But our Moscow police are arguing. You can tell they're arguing with these thugs, and then all of a sudden, Russian military police pull up, and this is a military base we've entered.
Ooh.
And we're not allowed a step further. So the Russian military police turn away the Moscow police, and we go home with our tail between our legs, and we did not get inside that factory. And so what we discovered was the Russian military was actually protecting
The mafia.
the mafia with these pirate factories.
Wow.
Corrupt generals in the Russian military. So that was a pretty big failure for us, and we were close to giving up. And I tried one last Hail Mary, the diplomatic approach. I went to the U.S. ambassador in Moscow, highest-ranking American in the country, and I pleaded with him about the state of the music business in Russia and how American artists, sure, we're getting ripped off, and Elton John, Mariah Carey are not getting their royalties. It's true, but what's more important is Russia's not developing a music industry like we Americans can help them do if they would just fight these pirates. Close these pirate factories, stop the mafia from doing all these bad things, because the mafia was using the money for sex trafficking, drug trafficking, there's all kinds of societal evils, right? So there was a lot of reasons to stop this, and the ambassador, who was appointed by George W. Bush, President Bush, he called the White House and he persuaded them to block Russia from entering the World Trade Organization until they closed these pirate factories.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
So that was our only way to get any.
So you're sitting in a van in a bulletproof vest. You're watching all of this go on. How long was this after you had been on the farm?
Well, let's see. A good 10 years had passed since I've been on the farm.
But that's a long journey from that farm in Ohio to sitting in that van.
But the thing is, Randy, it was the greatest job in the world, right? I'm CEO of a record company in Moscow, right? At that time, yes, one of the most dangerous cities in the world, but also one of the most exciting too. And people were looking to me as the American on the spot to be the expert, right? And that was a great feeling. It was a glamorous job. I met Enrique Iglesias. I met, Mariah Carey, all these stars, Brian. But I also got to do good things for Russia. I got to represent American know-how, business know-how, and it made me proud. Really proud to be helping them.
That's a great story.
And I didn't want to lose that job. So I was willing to sit in that van and with a bulletproof vest.
Talk about some of the dangers that you faced, particularly as an American living in Moscow at a time of enormous change, and of course the mafia was exerting its influence. And so tell me about some of the stories of the dangers that you faced, and throughout your tenure there.
Well, as a record executive, you don't get to choose who you have to help promote in the country, right? So we would get Marilyn Manson would come to Moscow. Guess who has to take care of Marilyn Manson while he's in Moscow? Because he's on Universal Music's label, right?
So the danger was more from Marilyn Manson than Moscow.
I want to be back in that band wearing a bulletproof vest.
I was quite worried because he was doing the God's Guns and Government tour with
in Russia.
Around the world, but his next stop was, and I could see it coming because the record company in L.A., Interscope, called me and said, guess what, David, you're getting Marilyn Manson, so take care of him, keep him out of jail, right? And he had just been put in jail in Detroit at that time. Remember, he did something on stage to a police. So, it's like, oh, God,
So if we're jailing him here, chances are
the odds are really good.
He's not going to be well received in Moscow.
Well, and you have the Russian Orthodox Church, which really made me nervous about Marilyn's show, because he's got a pretty wild show, And
how much power did they have?
That's the story at that time, and we're talking 2001, 2002. They were still weak. They hadn't gained their power. They were still rebounding from, the collapsed Soviet Union, and they did not stop Marilyn's tour. And I was waiting for the picket lines. I was waiting for the harassment, all kinds of things to happen. It did not happen. You know what did stop Marilyn, though? A Russian snowstorm. A Russian snowstorm. Just like Hitler, just like Napoleon, the Russian winter.
Still got to deal with the weather.
So Marilyn's bus was coming down the Leningrad highway to Moscow, and wham, got hit by a major snowstorm, ran off the ditch. So we had to postpone the show. And
boy, that Russian mafia controls everything.
Everyone thought it was a priest out there doing it or something. I don't know. But no, Marilyn ended up performing, and he didn't end up in a Russian jail, and I didn't end up crucified by the Russian Orthodox Church. So that worked out.
Wow. You had to deal with terrorism as well.
I had to do a lot of, there were 2 wars in Chechnya while I was there, and they were both bloody. And the wives of the Chechens that were killed by the Russian soldiers, they called themselves Black Widows. They would come to Moscow, and they would terrorize Moscow with various bomb attacks. And then there were sieges of theaters where they took hostages, and then the school in Beslan was the one that really hurt me the most. They took an entire school hostage, and over 180 kids were killed in that incident. So the Russians just had a lot of danger and a lot of trouble around every corner.
Did you feel nervous often?
Not until the terrorism. Funny enough, the mafia guys didn't scare me because I really thought they had bigger fish to fry. There was more money in diamonds and gas and oil and music. Records.
Why do we want to screw around with records?
Why me? I'm not really that. But the truth is, I was upsetting the Kremlin more than I was upsetting the mafia, because that blocking Russia getting into the World Trade Organization was a really big victory for the music industry. And
so you ruffled feathers all the way up to the top.
I certainly did, but probably the riskiest thing I did, and I'll let Fred tell a little bit of this story, is sign a band called Tattoo that in the book we call the most dangerous band in the world. And there's a reason for that. Well, Fred, let me let you tell this story. This is.
So a lot of people remember Tattoo, the 2 young girls, because they kissed in their video, which of course, in Russia, homosexuality was a criminal act. So it was
it still is.
They don't have homosexuals in Russia, do they?
Right, yeah, right. So very provocative. Their manager, that was his whole thing, was, being provocative. So David signs them, and of course, they are a massive hit around the world. all over. Number one in Japan. Number one in Europe. Did very well in America. The best-selling Russian act in America. So David books them on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and tells the girls, they're in New York at the time. The girls are about to go to Burbank, and David tells them, the Beatles appeared on Ed Sullivan, and that was a big deal. And this is going to be a big deal for you. This is going to break you in America. And he says, so you've got to behave. And they tell him, oh, we'll behave. Did they wink at you? I think, we'll behave. He had to go back to Moscow for a meeting with the U.S. ambassador. So they go to Burbank. They're on the show. And they were told not to kiss. They did, but that wasn't the issue, because they just cut away from the kiss. The issue was they were wearing T-shirts, and just before they went on the air, they wrote on their T-shirts with markers. Now, what did it say in Russian, David?
Hui с войны.
Fuck the war.
Oh.
And this is when the Iraq War was starting to go bad for America, and the world was turning against it.
Right.
So that was a message to America.
To America.
Yes.
To American audiences, yeah.
So most people watching at home, of course, just saw some Russian letters. But the Russians in America who were watching flooded the NBC switchboard. You've just put an obscenity on the air. Well, you're not supposed to say fuck on American broadcast television. The FCC,
they frown upon it.
Not for, yeah. So it was a big deal. So Tattoo gets banned from Jay Leno. And was it all Universal?
No, they threatened to ban everyone from Universal for a while. They were that mad. But
the next night, Tattoo goes on Jimmy Kimmel on ABC.
And we sell more records.
Yeah.
And did they wear the same T-shirts?
Yeah.
They did.
They did.
Okay.
They did. But they didn't show that.
Yeah.
So you were there from when to when? What was the time frame that you had spent in Moscow?
So from 1993 to 2005, and then I came back in 2013 till 2016. So I had two tours of duty.
So you were there during 9/11.
Yes, I was.
What,
oh my gosh!
Can you describe what it was like there?
I'll never forget it. I was sitting in the office. My door was open. And from my office, the entire marketing department, if they wanted, could look in and see if you really wanted to. It was kind of an open seating situation, a lot of glass. And I'm watching on TV the first tower hit. And it's early, and it's afternoon in Moscow, early morning in New York. And there comes the second plane. And everyone's looking at me and wondering what's going on, David. And I'm wondering, is the country I'm in, Russia, somehow attacking my home country? I don't know what to think, And I call my wife at home and we talk and said get our kid out of school. Our son was in kindergarten then, and get him out. And I went into the office and made an announcement to the team, because I was the only American in my company. I was 40 Russians, young Russians, and they were scared. They were scared. And I wanted to comfort them. And I told them, listen, I need to go home and be with my family, but I just want you to know that everything's going to be all right and we're going to make it through this. And this is not about Russia and America. This is about terrorism. And I don't know how I knew it, but I just somehow knew it. And I said that to them. And I went home and I comforted my wife and watched the rest of the news. But that was a strange feeling, to be in a foreign country and not even clear if that country is part of the.
How are they portraying it in the news and such?
That it could be a foreign government. It could be an attack from a foreign government. This could be this, because then the Pentagon. It was like, okay, the towers, but then the Pentagon. So this does sound like a foreign government attack. So it was very strange. But in my heart, I knew, because Russia and America, these were the best of times between Russia and America. This is when we were coming together. And, Russians were listening to American advice and wanting us to be there, and
And did you have a sense at some point that was going to start changing?
Yeah, when Putin came in. Pretty
so
quickly.
talk a little bit about that change, because you were there at a time where they were welcoming you in and looking, trying to build legitimate market, forces within the company and develop a functioning capitalistic system, and then all of a sudden that changes. It wasn't really a gradual change.
No, it changed when Boris Yeltsin just simply drank too much and couldn't handle another day in the Kremlin. And anointed Putin his successor because he's from the KGB, could guarantee Yeltsin and his family's safety. Because that's how it usually goes, right?
Wow.
So he made a deal, and he made a deal with the devil. Putin immediately closed down independent television. That was one of his first steps, and that began the long process of closing everything down. The independent voices, and he quickly developed a large army of internal security forces to squash dissent. He immediately militarized the nation and started promoting World War II movies and talking about the Great Patriotic War, and how that was Russia's victory over the Nazis. And he did everything he could to put them on the path they are now. And he's famous for giving a speech that he thought the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century was the breakup of the Soviet Union. I mean, believe me, the Ukrainians don't think that,
Nope.
and the Armenians and the Georgians don't think that.
Nobody thinks that except Putin and a handful of people who. But that's a very famous quote of his, and he's attempting to correct it as we speak.
He is.
He feels like it's his mission, his calling, to reassemble the Soviet Union.
He does, and you have to wonder. It is in Russian genetics to some extent. I know this might be a little controversial, but I lived there 15 years, and I visited many cities across the country, and I got to know a lot of the other Ukrainians and Georgians and Armenians.
You spent time in Ukraine as well.
Yes, I did, and I very much love Ukraine, and I do think Russia has this genetic disposition to keep expanding, and I think it's some sort of insecurity that goes all the way back to Genghis Khan, believe it or not, when he came all the way to Moscow and raped and pillaged, and then everyone else has tried, right? Like I said, Hitler tried, Napoleon tried. Moscow is constantly creating buffers around it to protect it. That's just a thing they do and have always done, and so I think that's part of it too. Although Putin, has used the ideal of the Russian Empire to motivate young men to fight. But the truth is, he's just taking advantage of that Russian gene that I think he's tapping into. Not all Russians feel that way, of course, but there's something to that.
Well, by this time, there were people who were making a lot of money on music and stuff like that. And were they starting to see that this might be changing, and how did they react?
You mean in Russia?
In Russia.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Well, the community that has always reacted to corruption the bravest, in my mind, is the hip-hop community. And it's one of the really great thrills of my life that I've been able to witness firsthand the power of American hip-hop from the Bronx, right? I mean, from the Bronx, 1970s hip-hop, travel all over the world, cross any boundary, and then the most amazing thing is a local hip-hop community develops, and then you have local hip-hop stars, and it's a lifestyle. It's more than just a genre of music. It's an actual lifestyle.
Well, it's social speaking.
And how did it manifest in Russia?
In Russia, so it manifested, the biggest breakthrough was Eminem, the Marshall Mathers LP that came out in the early 2000s. I was a big fan of that. I had to persuade my British and French bosses that European music is not what the kids want in Russia. They want American hip-hop. They want West Coast, East Coast hip-hop. And Eminem was the breakthrough. That album really just caught fire all over the world, but in Russia especially, and Eastern Europe. And that opened the door for Dr. Dre, Tupac, Jay-Z, Public Enemy, all the rest. The founding fathers and the new artists, the women hip-hop artists. It just really broke through. And it made me very successful in Russia because Universal had both Def Jam and Interscope, two of the most important rap labels in the world, right? We had them both. And so we were really cornering the market, and we really were bringing it to the Russian kids. And they loved it, and they loved it so much that young Russian boys and girls started singing in hip-hop themselves. And they were getting good and better and better. And I signed one of the first ones. His name is Detzel. And he's one of the founding fathers of Russian hip-hop. And he was fantastic. I signed him to Universal. He did a record that I tried to get Def Jam to release here in America, and I think they would have if he had lived. But Detzel, being a true hip-hop artist, was speaking truth to power.
Yeah.
And this is, years and years before the Kremlin and the Russians invaded Ukraine. He was calling out corruption in the Kremlin. He was calling out Putin directly. And he had a heart attack suddenly after a concert once under very mysterious circumstances.
Suddenly, yeah.
He passed away. He's no longer with us. And that still remains an open mystery, like so many of the murders over there. I wouldn't be surprised if that was somehow connected with.
Well, it seems that's an MO that Putin uses.
Poison and falling out of windows.
Yeah, poison. But there's he likes to inject people.
He does.
He gives a simulated heart attack.
He
looks
does.
like a heart attack.
It's sending a message too.
Yeah.
It's meant to send a message.
And was it a chilling message to the hip hop community? Did it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But it was on top of many others. There was so many things cracking down on independent voices. But still, to their credit, the hip hop community stayed brave, and to this day, in 2024, they're the bravest artists of all. They're the ones speaking out. They're the ones singing. A few of them have had to leave. A couple of them have been labeled foreign agents so they could be arrested.
Right. That's the big.
But the kids listen to them. And I honestly believe that a lot of Russian men deserted or, left Russia or are in hiding or not joining that army because they're hearing hip-hop music and these Russian hip artists talking about how this is...
There's another world out there.
Exactly, and that this is Putin's war, not theirs. Ukrainians have done nothing against us. I think they're having an effect, and I think Putin will have a hard time mobilizing more soldiers, which he needs to do.
Oh, yes.
He needs to do
well,
it.
He's losing them.
You can't keep getting guys from the prison. They've emptied all the prisons.
Right.
Old dudes, 65 and older, you run out of those eventually. And these conscripts straight out of high school put him on the front line. He needs to mobilize, but...
Did you leave on your own terms?
I did. I left. The second time I left, it was after the invasion of Crimea, when the Russians took that, and I was there with Gibson guitars. Mm-hmm. I had opened the very first Gibson guitar showroom in Russia, and was really proud to be back, and was really hopeful. And I was working, with guitarists, which was different because usually before that I'd worked with pop stars mainly, and now I was working with rock stars. I mean, really heavy metal. And Rudolf Schenker from the Scorpions, and those kinds of guys, and it was a lot of fun. And Russians love Gibson. That's an iconic brand like Harley Davidson or Apple. I mean, it's just one of these brands that's beloved by musicians.
Transcends borders.
Incredible. Nashville, who knew Russians knew everything about Nashville, but they did. And so I was really happy to open up the showroom there, and it was the year Russia had the Olympics in Sochi, so I went to that, and I just had this moment where I was standing in front of the flame there and just so proud of Russia and proud of the world coming together, and I really thought, man, this could be the moment. We have world peace. And as soon as that Olympic flame was out, the Russians had invaded Crimea and took it. and the first Russian invasion of Ukraine had begun, and here we are now today. So that was a great mistake, and I eventually left Russia, and we closed down the Gibson showroom. So it was wrong. It was wrong of them to invade Crimea, and I just, I lost a lot of friends over that, and I lost a lot of people that I was surprised they supported that invasion. People that had worked with me in the record company, an American record company with American values, American artists, right?
And they were okay with it.
And they were still, why? Because Crimea has the best beaches. It was just insane. It really hurt me. And some of my artists even supported it.
Wow.
I had to leave.
And is it because they have the same belief that this is our land, that it was taken away from us?
Like I said, that genetic disposition, that's mine. I mean, it's already the largest country in the world, 11 time zones. 11 time zones.
Yeah.
One country.
That's remarkable.
Yet they needed one more island. Crimea,
Well, it's got beaches.
Yeah, it's got nice beaches. All right, we have to take a quick pause to hear from our good friends at the McCallum Theater, our presenting sponsor, but we will continue our conversation with David Junk and Fred Bronson right after this.
The McCallum Theater's 2024-2025 season is on sale now. The world's top artists, from jazz, pop, classical, and comedy to the best of Broadway. Only at the Valley's favorite place for great entertainment. Tickets are on sale now at the McCallum Theater box office, by phone, or online at mccallumtheater.org. Tickets sell quickly, so order yours today. A new, exciting season only at the McCallum. The McCallum Theater's 2024-2025 season is on sale now.
Welcome back, and once again, thanks to the McCallum Theater for supporting what we're doing here, and they're fostering these kinds of conversations. I find this stuff fascinating.
Yeah.
When I was a student and I studied international relations, we were in the midst, right at the height of the Cold War, and I graduated from college in 1989, and the wall collapsed. And I'd spent most of my college career studying U.S.-Soviet relations. I thought these bastards couldn't hold out. Now I've got all these tools to work with the Soviet Union. They're gone. But that incredible transition, and you were there for a great deal of it. And I want to take you back to 1993 and tell me a little bit about the experiences you had there, because there were enormous changes going on right after the Soviet Union broke up, and growing pains. So talk a little bit about, you said it was like Chicago in the 1930s or the Wild Wild West. There was no law.
There was chaos, gangster capitalism, and the looting of Mother Russia on incredible scales. And before I started my job in the music business with PolyGram, I had a job before that with a Russian diamond company. And that's my first experience in the Russian underworld, where I really
you
saw,
certainly must have been up against.
It was something else. It was the crime. It's still to this day considered one of the biggest crimes in the diamond industry, in the history of the diamond industry.
And this is all just around controlling the price of diamonds.
Exactly. Yeah. So what happened is, when Russia fell apart and the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia was broke, right? They had gas shortages, food shortages. You remember the bread lines. You saw that on TV. And Boris Yeltsin was the new president, but he had the communists breathing down his back, right? Constantly putting pressure on him. They wanted to take back power. So he had to get money somewhere. And there was one way he could make some money fast, he realized. It was with the diamond contract the Soviet Union had with the De Beers diamond monopoly. That was coming due. It was time to renew it, right? De Beers, the world's diamond monopoly, had paid the Soviet Union for decades to keep diamonds in the ground. Keep them in the ground. Keep them in Siberia.
It's like subsidizing our farmers in the Midwest to not grow.
100%. Keep those diamonds deep beneath that cold Siberian tundra so we can keep the price of diamonds up.
Right.
so that they're rare. Well, diamonds are not rare. The Russians are sitting on billions and billions and billions of dollars of diamonds, and they just can't get them out of the ground. They've never been able to properly develop a mining industry like De Beers, right? So Boris Yeltsin decided, well, you know what? You pay us $4 billion annually to keep those diamonds in the ground. We need a lot more than that. And De Beers balked at that. What are you going to do? You got nowhere to go. Either you take this or leave it. So Yeltsin and his corrupt team around him decided to create a fake diamond company and put that fake diamond company in America, in San Francisco, and pretend that this diamond company is going to be the new De Beers. And the reason it was chosen as San Francisco is a couple of reasons. One, San Francisco, we just elected Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton had the peace dividend idea, Nancy, all the Willie Brown, they were all very supportive of San Francisco and Russia coming together.
There was a large Russian population.
Exactly. But the main reason to open in America a Russian diamond company is De Beers was banned from doing business in America because of the antitrust laws, right? So this fake Russian diamond company opened up, and they were looking for Americans to make it really look like they call it Potomac
It's Tony's
Village,
Diamond Company. Yeah.
And I'm a broke student at San Francisco State University trying to finish my MBA degree. And I send my resume to some accounting firm, and somehow I get a job with this diamond company.
Wow.
And I'm in the accounting department suddenly. And it was insanity because the Russians had actually been stealing the money and buying jets and cars and properties. They went to Lake Tahoe and paid cash for the estate where the Godfather Part 2 was filmed because they were Godfather fans. But cash on the spot, They went nuts spending the money.
Fleur de Lac was the name of the estate where they shot that.
Yes, they paid cash for it. And eventually the FBI caught on and started spying on the Russians, but it was the IRS, just like Al Capone, by the way. The IRS is what closed them down. They didn't pay taxes on all that diamond money they were stealing. And De Beers, meanwhile, were laughing. They were laughing. This was hilarious. It was a joke.
Yeah.
This is like American Hustle, that movie.
Yeah.
It was a total.
It was a real shit show for the Russians.
But I was in the middle of it. I met my wife there in that company, so I met my Russian wife. And
good memories.
Yeah. And it's what took me to Russia.
Yeah.
Because they eventually sent me to Moscow and made me the big chief of their office there.
Wow.
It was all to paint this picture of Americans when the truth is the Russians were stealing the diamond money and blowing it all over the world.
Wow.
And then you got accused by the Russian prosecutor.
Oh, yes. So when the IRS shut him down, the Russian prosecutor did the same thing in Russia, shut the office down there. Well, everyone's running like, rats, when you turn on the light. Well, guess who was left standing? Me. So I'm called in, and I'm questioned by the Russian state prosecutor for more than a year. And where are the diamonds? Where are the diamonds? Tell us where the diamonds are. I didn't know.
I don't know where the diamonds are. I was a county guy.
I don't know where the diamonds are.
I wouldn't be here if I knew where the diamonds were.
That's right. You wouldn't have caught me.
But they finally caught the ringleader, and he was on the cover of U.S. News and World Report in handcuffs. It was that big of a deal. Wow. And the headline was "Dirty Diamonds."
Were you worried?
What, that he was never going to get caught?
When the prosecutor was...
Oh, my God. I was threatened with Siberia for sure. They warned me. If I don't remember where the diamonds are, I will be looking at prison time in
hard
Siberia.
labor in Siberia. So how many times were you threatened like that?
Well, just about every time they brought me into the office, which was probably half a dozen.
And was it only during that experience, or did you have similar experiences later?
No, that was the most direct. And what's kind of interesting, Patrick, is maybe that was so rough on me that the later experiences didn't faze me. I really learned. It was a baptism by fire, right? Because this is corruption on the highest level.
Yeah.
It's the Kremlin. It's the actual Kremlin involved.
Yeah, I mean, it's the government that controls everything that you are doing. in cahoots with the mafia, and
So that was my first experience.
So a couple of years ago, we
I can
all
see why you love the country.
Oh, yeah,
and chose to stay.
So a couple of years ago, we all saw the Brittany Griner story and everything
yes.
that was happening with her.
Yes.
As that was happening, what was coming back to you? Were there ever issues like that when you were there, or were the relationships so strong between the countries that that wasn't really an issue?
If I was there now, for sure, they would nab me and put me in prison just like her and use me as a bargaining chip, regardless of whether I broke a law or not. Because the gay propaganda laws that are on the books now, they could arrest me for what I was doing with tattoo back in 2001, 2002.
There's no statute of limitations.
I'm quite sure they would overlook that. They would find a reason.
We just got rid of that statute of limitation law.
So I can't return to Russia until there's a change in the Kremlin, obviously.
Do you want to?
I'd love to.
And your wife is Russian.
My wife is Russian.
So obviously,
breaks her heart.
And you still, I would assume she still has family and
Yeah, sure, yeah. And we can't see them.
can't see them.
Yeah.
But David did return to Ukraine.
Yes, so I went to Ukraine twice last year. And I have a lot of friends there. And my wife's mother was Ukrainian, too. So Ukraine has always been a big part of my life. And when I worked at Universal asked me to open more record companies in these Eastern European countries, right? And, once we got Russia on the right track, next step was all the other countries of Eastern Europe. And Ukraine was my favorite because it reminded me of, those wheat fields, those golden wheat fields kind of reminded me of my farm in Ohio. And it was always the breadbasket of the Soviet Union. So as a farm boy, I could relate to Ukraine in that way. But also, I ended up doing something, frankly, accidentally, that was really important for Ukrainians. I learned only later. When we opened up a Universal Music office in Ukraine, we were breaking them free from Moscow because it didn't make sense to me. Why do we have Russia? Why do we have Moscow controlling the Ukrainian music market? That doesn't make any sense. Let's open our own office there. We can make our own money there, find our own Ukrainian artists. Russia will be fine. And then we'll do the same in other countries, right? That was what was driving me. What I didn't realize is Russia had been overshadowing Ukraine for centuries in everything from business, culture, to art. We here in America know so little about Ukrainian culture, and we often attribute it to Russia, mistakenly, right? And by cutting free the music industry, at least years before the war, right? This is 2003 we're talking about, 2004, long before everyone else started realizing Ukraine needed to be free from Russia. We broke free that music business, and they created their own independent music industry, and it's flourishing to this day. And thank God for that, because those artists are very important for supporting their army. And and the music industry is an important tax revenue base for Ukraine, and
that's where the protest is coming from.
Exactly, and mark my words, Kyiv, once this war is over, will be like Berlin after World War II. It'll be the most important city in the world. It'll be one of the most advanced. I mean, look what they're doing with drone technology alone. But the music, the entertainment, the culture.
And you were didn't you produce some television over there, reality show?
I did. I wrote and produced a music reality show that brought 12 Ukrainian pop singers, girls, to Hollywood for 2 weeks to create a Spice Girls. We were looking for the Ukrainian Spice Girls, and they eliminated a girl every episode till we got the final 5, and they mingled with Stevie Wonder and Brian McKnight and Dennis They learned weightlifting with Dennis Rodman.
Here in Hollywood.
Right, yeah.
Close by in Hollywood.
And Eric Roberts, who's a big star in Ukraine. He appeared in some films that was very popular in Ukraine.
He's on Dancing with the Stars
Exactly,
right now.
Exactly. He was my star celebrity juror to pick the final 5, and it was wonderful, and it was a big hit in Ukraine. It was on Ukrainian TV, but what I was proud of is Ukrainians got to see the best of Los Angeles, right? They got to see Beverly Hills and Malibu and Santa Monica and Universal Studios, and I was really proud of just to show off my city,
Fred, you've written a number of books.
Yes.
How much fun was this one, though, to sit down and to hear these stories and to help frame the book?
Well, I really think this might be the best book I've written so far. And that's true.
I like that.
And it's not because of my writing. It is because of David's stories. No, they are. They're totally compelling. I mean, we're actually in talks now about turning this into a film because it's that kind of a page turner.
Amazing.
So it was great fun.
There's got to be a podcast scene in there somewhere.
Well, we are talking about that as well.
We love that.
We can tell you later more about that.
Maybe even radio theater.
They're not talking to us, Patrick.
No.
Not yet.
It won't be
But,
involved.
who knows where we go after this. So I spent 6 months interviewing David. David did an outline of his life in Russia. So I had a roadmap of where to go. And literally 6 months of interviews and 6 months of writing. And now we have a book. So it was great fun. A lot of work, but it was great fun.
And the book is called Rockin The Kremlin.
It is.
And I want everybody to go where you get books and get this book because we've just barely scratched the tip of the iceberg on this one. But a fascinating 15 years for you. And watching the world change from a really unique perspective.
I want to ask you a little bit more about Ukraine, too.
Okay.
But before we do, it's time. It's time, Patrick. The Big Conversations Little Bar Rapid Round. We ask our guests 5 key questions, and we want them to answer them all in under 2 minutes. The Rapid Round is presented by Vitara Wellness, just a stone's throw from Little Bar at 74345 Highway 111 in Palm Desert. Vitara Wellness is your path to lasting weight loss success. Open Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Vitara Wellness offers medical weight loss services, IV vitamin and hydration therapy, hormone replacement therapy, and regenerative cell therapy. Transform your health, transform your life. Visit them online at Vitara. That's VITARA wellness.com. Live life well. Gentlemen, are you ready?
Sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Far away.
All right. See if I can read these. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Both dogs. Oh, good. Okay, that means we can go to the second question. You can only own one book. What is it?
It's Rockin The Kremlin by
Yes.
Yes, good. That's my answer, too.
That's so obvious. If I can't mention Rockin The Kremlin, for me, The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick.
The Gospel in Brief by Lev Tolstoy.
Interesting. Not surprised. That's an interesting first time we've heard Tolstoy on the Rapid Round. You can only watch one movie for the rest of your life. What is it?
Star Trek The Motion Picture.
excellent answer.
That's the one with Chewbacca,
But
right?
it's got to be the director's
Yeah,
cut.
no. And I'm not saying it because I'm in it. I would watch it anyway.
The Big Lebowski.
Oh, I love the Big Lebowski. That's a great one. One place you take out-of-town visitors when they come here.
La Perlita, the best Mexican restaurant in the Coachella Valley.
Nice.
You mean a restaurant or
Any place.
when I have visitors?
When
to
you're
my-
here, yeah, and they visit you here.
In
Where do you
Los
like
Angeles,
to take
in
them?
Los Angeles, you
No,
mean?
here in the.
Oh,
He
here.
lives in
Oh,
Los
you live
Angeles.
in Los Angeles.
You know what though? But I've been here with visitors. I've been here with out-of-town visitors for sure, and I love I love the Joshua Tree. I love to go to the Joshua Tree. Yeah.
All right, but give me the LA place because
The LA place. Well, you gotta go to Malibu Seafood. You gotta give them some seafood and the view of the Pacific Ocean. Especially my folks who are from the Midwest. They need to see some ocean when they come out here.
You can see one musician, living or dead, in a concert. Who would it be?
Elvis Presley.
Did you see Elvis?
No, I did not.
I saw him in 6 months before he passed
You
away.
were so fortunate. Where?
The Cow Palace in South
my
San Francisco.
gosh.
Yeah.
What was the encores?
You know, he
Battle Hymn of
wasn't.
the Republic, probably. Right?
He was, yeah.
The trilogy. Yeah.
He was at that point reading words, the lyrics off the page and stuff. So it wasn't his finest moment, but for an Elvis Presley fan, it didn't make any difference. I was in the same building. How about you, Fred?
It would be ABBA, who I did see in North America in 1979, and now everyone can see them virtually in London.
That's right. Well, that's it. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, that is
Thank you.
this week's Rapid Round presented by Vitara Wellness in Palm Desert. Visit VitaraWellness.com or call them at 760-208-4011. Thanks, guys. Good answers.
Those were really good answers.
That was a lot of
Thanks.
fun.
Well, they were good
You didn't see the
questions.
Tolstoy one coming, did you?
You heard that. Those were good questions.
Yes,
Good.
actually.
The dog-cat question. We need to freshen that one
All
up.
right, I'll get a new one.
Ferrets
Birds
or
or fish?
We have both had dogs.
Yes, yes.
Birds or fish?
birds or fish?
Not that interesting.
It's not. This is pretty amazing. So Ukraine,
thanks, yeah.
talk about, you went back. Did I read that you were doing a podcast at
Yes,
one point?
that's right.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I went back to Ukraine in May of 2023 to see my friends in the music industry. As Fred mentioned about Eurovision earlier, Eurovision was supposed to take place in Kiev, but it was obviously not possible because of the war, and it was moved to Liverpool. And I knew that was going to be a tragedy for Ukrainians because that's a big deal. When you host Eurovision, it's a big economic, but it's prestige, and it's a big deal for your music business too. And so I wanted to be in Ukraine that night that Eurovision was on air in Liverpool. I just wanted to be with my colleagues and friends and artists. And so I flew to Warsaw, took the 17-hour train called the Kiev Express. You can't fly to Ukraine because it's not possible. So I took the long train ride in. And while I was riding in, I was having a little bit of a crisis, to be honest with you, because I was really upset with Russia and this war. And I was angry that this country, Russia, that I had been helping for 30 years of my life, was terrorizing its neighbor, Ukraine. And it was just really hard for me to process. And you have a lot of time on that train to think about it, right? And so when I got to Ukraine, got to Kiev, and was watching Eurovision with my friends and colleagues there, wouldn't you know, the Russians decided to launch missiles at the city, and they launched the first ever hypersonic missile.
Oh my gosh!
Which, thank God, our American patriots, hooray America! I think they manufacture them here in California too. I think Raytheon or whatever. Thank God they knocked it out of the sky, saved my butt. But I was in a bunker for the Eurovision, so I didn't get to see, bomb shelter, so I didn't get to see the song contest on TV. But I got to experience American know-how of protecting that. I was pretty proud about that. But what I did the next day changed my life forever. My friends took me to the northern suburb of Bucha, which you may recall is where the first war crimes, the mass murderers were uncovered, the mass graves. And I went to the church where those mass graves were, and I met an elderly woman, a church worker, and she let me inside, and she told me her story of how she had hid in the church basement for the days during the Russian occupation when they were just tossing bodies in the back of the church. And she was scared for her life, obviously. And she was just shaking, and it really, her soul connected with mine. I don't know. I just took away from that I have got to do something. I am more than just angry. I must act against the Russians. This is so wrong what they have done. And so when I got back to the U.S., I realized that what can I do? I'm not a soldier. I can't fight. I can try to connect business to business, but one thing I understand is culture. That's my thing, culture, right? And one of the things that the Russians are trying to do is eliminate Ukrainian culture, erase it, national identity. That's one of their stated goals. That's why so many museums and art schools and schools in general, libraries have been bombed by not exactly military objects, right? But they're getting bombed all the time. So I decided to create a podcast about Ukrainian culture. And I have a partner in Ukraine, so we have Ukrainians we invite on air there in Kiev, and then I talk to them from Los Angeles, and we put it on air. It's called Art During Wartime.
Yeah.
And
That's a great title.
And its mission is very simple, to preserve Ukrainian culture from Russia's attempts to erase it, and that's what we do.
That's fantastic.
Art During Wartime.
Art During Wartime. It's on Spotify and YouTube and all those channels. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you for the plug. Appreciate it.
Wait, we'll plug your book. We'll plug your podcast.
I need 2 more hours.
I know. This is been fascinating. Thank you both for coming on.
Thank you.
Fred, thank you for steering us in this direction.
My pleasure. I mean, I tell people the book is such a great read, like I said before, not because of me, but because of David's stories. So anything we can do to let people know about it, I'm happy to do.
Okay, the book is again called Rockin The Kremlin, David Junk and Fred Bronson, and pick it up, I think, especially for those of us who remember the end of the Cold War and the transition from that, in the early 90s. I think people will find this just a fascinating look back in time through your eyes, how you lived it. And Fred, thank you for crafting such a great book.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick.
Randy.
Thank you both
Randy.
for being here.
Thank you both.
Loved it.
Our thanks to our producer, John McMullen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Always
John.
a great job. My co-host, Randy Florence. Thank you, sir.
Another great job.
Every one of these is a jewel. I mean, it's no art during wartime, but it's a darn good podcast.
Diamonds.
I'm Patrick Evans. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back again on your favorite podcast platform with another edition of Big Conversations Little Bar.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Big Conversations Little Bar. Recorded on location at Skip Page's Little Bar in Palm Desert, California, the center of the Coachella Valley universe, and presented by the McCallum Theater, online at mccallumtheater.org. This program is a production of the Mutual Broadcasting System. All episodes are available from BigConversationsLittleBar.com and most major podcast portals, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify.